Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. The Calvert County Blueprint Committee will conduct this meeting virtually on January 3rd, 2024 at 2 o'clock via Zoom. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and posted online publicly for reference. With that, if Ruth, you give me a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Dr. Sampson?
Here.
Mark Willis?
Here.
Pamela Cousins?
I'm here.
Melissa Goshorn?
Here.
Donna Ostenso?
Sorry, here.
Wilson Perrin? Still not here? No. Mike Schisler? We're missing him too. Joanna Stallings, we said was no. Stacy Taman, no. Ruthie Buckler, I am here. Tony Navarro?
Here.
John Norris?
Here.
And Linda Turner is joining us today. She's shadowing Mark. I'm sure he'll talk about that later, but Linda Turner is our new Deputy County Administrators, for those that do not know. So we welcome her to the meeting.
Yeah, and I don't really need to say it later because she's on here because hopefully one day she replaces me as the co-chair, which is my intent in the long run. But anyway, yes, Linda has been here for I think about a month or a year. Time flies when you're having fun. So with that, if everybody's had a chance to look at number 2 under general business, review and approve agenda for today's meeting, January 3rd, 2024. Do I have a recommendation? Is there a motion to,
I make the motion to approve.
is there a second?
This is Pamela, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll move forward. So with that, Dr. Sampson, I think as usual, we turn number 3 over to you, which is Calvert County Public Schools Blueprint Status Update.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Willis, I didn't notice that you were putting both of the co-chairs up for replacement. Just one.
Just me. You're staying. I'm the one planning.
No, I know what you meant. I know what you meant. I'm just saying. So, well, welcome, Ms. Turner, and looking forward to working with you on this group. And Happy New Year to everyone. So I will jump right into our update, and the PowerPoint was shared late. I didn't send it until late this morning. And I was trying to order everything to determine whether or not Mr. Lane was going to be here at the beginning or whether it was going to be a little bit later. And so his schedule conflicted, so he won't be able to get on until 2:30. At which time I should be wrapping this up, and hopefully we can get through the rest of the agenda and then bring him in as an introduction when the time is appropriate. So without further ado, Ms. Buckler, did you want to share your screen and show the PowerPoint, or would you prefer that I do that?
It's up to you if you want to, for us to do that. Technology Services, who is sort of hosting this meeting for us through Zoom, they also have the ability to do that. So Andrew, I think if you're on here, if you can do that for us, it's in the update I just sent.
So that document is a development guide. I'll reference that, but the PowerPoint is what we're actually going to be reviewing right now.
I just teamed it too, Andrew.
Okay. So I'll just jump into our first piece of information, and it's just an update on our expert review teams process. If you remember, the AIB approved the schedule for the expert review teams to visit schools back in October. And so we have a couple of, sorry, I'm muted. So we have one school that will be reviewed this year. And that's going to be Huntington High School. And that review is scheduled for February 8th and 9th. Principals received information a while back. They had principal meetings that occurred with all schools on the list to be reviewed. And those principal meetings consisted of questions, getting a feel for some data that had to be submitted. And then they received a communication toolkit from MSDE that was approved by the AIB to be shared with families in their community. So the Huntington High School community is aware that the review will be taking place. And again, these are informative kind of fact-finding school reviews to figure out best practices and areas for potential improvement for all schools across the state of Maryland. So all schools in the state will be reviewed, but for this year, we only have, Calvert County only has one, and that'll be Huntington High School. All right, moving on to our next update, which is the administrator PD session. Mr. Brett Lane and I, our strategic facilitator, collaborated back in November to present a session for Calvert County administrators. And the session was designed to provide background knowledge, which they had background knowledge already, but just dig a little deeper with that, and then give them some key aspects of the blueprint to digest and allow them the opportunity to deep dive into possibilities for Calvert County Public Schools, specifically when addressing the career ladder, as well as components that impact staff and schools directly. So whether it be resources for students in Pillar 4 or early childhood education for Pillar 1, we had them divide up into groups. And so they were able to answer the questions that we provided by pillar and really provided some meaningful feedback. We plan to conduct another session with administrators to summarize the information, and that will be at the end of this month. We do have ANS scheduled for the 30th and the 31st of January, and the goal is to provide them with a summary of the data that was collected from their responses, as well as talk about some next steps toward our implementation plan. All right, next update is for National Board Certification. Score release was December 9th, and I am happy to report that our teacher count increased by 19 teachers. So we literally doubled our number of National Board Certified teachers from last year, and brings our total count to 38. This year, our teachers have declared their anticipated component pursuit. And I say anticipated because they do have some time to withdraw from those components, but they had to declare by the end of December so that we can turn around and have our documentation finalized and submitted to MSDE by this Friday. So the total number of candidates in this cycle are 86. 20 of them are initial candidates, meaning they have never attempted a component before. This is their first time. 16 continuing candidates, meaning they have attempted one or more components and are attempting new components this year. And then 50 are retake candidates. So they are attempting, as the word suggests, a component or more for the second time. All right, so the next update is with our strategic facilitator. And again, Brett Lane is our strategic facilitator. And the AIB funded the position. 22 out of the 24 LEAs in the state of Maryland chose to participate in this partnership. And for us, it's just been a huge benefit. It's been something that has really propelled our work forward and and helped us to think more deeply about the way that we approach our implementation over the next 10 years, not just what's due to the AIB in March and in July. So what's next with that partnership? Our pillar teams are meeting between now and January 22nd to look at the information that I will talk to you about in a minute from the administrator session. The idea is to determine the big rocks to capture in our March summary submission. So that summary submission, you'll see a screen that I will display a little bit later that talks about what we have to do in our summary report, which will be a 10-page report that's due in March. A full report on our partnership as well as implementation plan updates will also be provided during the February 8th Board of Education meeting for Calvert County. All right, so an overview of the administrator PD. That was back in November on the 29th and 30th. So we had administrators, supervisors that primarily consisted of principals, assistant principals, deans, coaches, a few teacher leaders as well, regarding the design and implementation of the blueprint. We used some guiding questions for each pillar, and the participants provided input and suggestions. They used written worksheets to capture individual information, and then they also worked in groups to provide some thematic responses to the information and the questions that was provided. And then we also had a Padlet that they used to capture some information, which was used as an exit ticket. So what were the big takeaways from the session? Are there any burning questions? Are there fears or hopes or aspirations regarding the information that you were provided? So all of those things were gathered. And again, Mr. Lane summarized that information, and I will share some kind of overview of what that is. So the respondents were 52 school-based leaders, and then I described them a little earlier, and then 63 district leaders and supervisors. And again, that resulted in amazing feedback. I can't speak highly enough to the engagement and participation of the folks during that session. I've been asked, and this is a sidebar, but I've been asked to do a PD, a choice PD for teachers on our February 16th PD day. In the southern end of the school system. One of the principals reached out to me, and they're hosting a regional professional development day on the 16th of February. And they asked me to do 2 blueprint sessions. So I'm actually going to mimic what we did with our administrators with the teachers to try to get some of the same feedback from their perspective to help us even further with regard to implementation planning. All right, so moving on to the feedback that we received based on each pillar. As you'll see on this slide, pillar 1, the challenges were listed, and you can see them there. I won't read those to you, but I will just elaborate on those. The staffing capacity was a decrease to the teacher-student ratio was something that came up, often connected to the ability of teachers to attend to meet increasing demand and staff the classrooms with qualified staff, as well as increasing behavioral issues of our youngest students. For the second one, staffing capacity, that training is basically regarding research-based practices, the new pre-K curriculum, and then again, appropriate behavioral support. One of the things from number 3 that came up was additional behavioral support and then additional staffing. So you'll hear some of these themes in these pillars repeat themselves. But number 4, Instructional expectations was clear guidelines and a supervision model, which it wasn't really described, but it's something that we can take as feedback. And I think when we talk to the teachers, it might actually, that might be something that really comes out in terms of their thoughts of what that might look like, and some potential opportunities for that. And then for number 5, the current building space is just limited. There's really nothing more that can be said about it. And when you're talking about adding more students, the idea of where do they go, and what do our facilities look like? What needs to be redesigned, or what is our construction budget? So how can we determine what changes need to be made structurally to buildings in order to be in code for our pre-K students? All right, moving on to pillar 2. Well, let me stop there and ask if there are any questions about what I talked about so far before I move on, because I have covered a lot. All right, I will go ahead.
I see no hands raised. I think you're good.
Yeah, I was going to use my in my Mark Willis voice, hearing none. I will move on to the next pillar. So pillar 2. Actually, sorry. So solutions for pillar 1. Nearly all the solutions focused on the training, staffing, and decreasing class sizes. But a few of the additional suggestions were to set up a regional pre-K program or pre-K centers and hubs that have 3 to 4 classrooms at each site. That was a suggestion. Another suggestion was a weekly schedule that was reduced, maybe a 3 or 4 day schedule as opposed to 5 days. And then using another day or 2 for collaboration and training. Partnerships with institutions of higher learning as a teacher incubator. Stronger partnerships and or incentives with the private daycares in order to increase our participation for the private providers. And then again, opportunities to collaborate or team with other teachers, which could happen on that shortened week, or if we're going to continue with the 5-day week for them, what might that look like? But providing additional opportunities to collaborate was important. All right, pillar 2. So with high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, you'll see the 3 suggestions there regarding best practices for supporting leaders and teachers. So explicitly and frequently including teachers in leadership positions and in opportunities for leading teams was something that came out. For number 2, academies, maybe a teacher academy or a training academy, and then opportunities for coaching and networking. And then shifting that role for number 3 to a more instructional and teacher-focused role in terms of the assistant principal. And the fact that the blueprint is calling for an AP to be in the classroom 20% of the day, how do we then shift that role to make it more teacher-based or teacher support-based as opposed to administrative in the sense of paperwork, IEPs, 504s, discipline, those kinds of things. So suggestions regarding professional learning, a more deliberate use of professional feedback and support, and increased opportunities, again, for teaming and collaboration. And then for number 2, building the structures into the school day was something that came up a lot. So not only providing that opportunity for collaboration, but doing so while folks are at work and not have to do it before school or after school. Establishing or structuring the planning with administrators. Maybe setting up some sort of instructional coaching within the building provided by expert teachers such as lead teachers and then more choice-based professional development options. And I will pause there for pillar 2 to see if there are any questions or comments.
Ms.
Ms.
Cousins.
Cousins.
Yes, thank you. My question is in regards to, was there any consideration or thought behind whether this could impact the negotiations or the contracts for educators?
There was a lot of that actually, because what Mr. Lane and I did was walk around, listen to conversations, take some notes. But what we didn't want to do is steer the conversation in a particular direction. So some of that did come up. But what we did was we wanted to impress upon them that in a perfect world, what would we do? Regardless of funding, regardless of negotiations or contracts, if we could do it in a perfect situation, how would we do it? What would it look like? What are the problems that you might see? So some of those things came up in terms of barriers, but we asked them not to focus on the barriers. But yes, to answer your question, there was discussion about it, but we wanted to try to still get solutions regardless of our current situation.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I see no hands raised.
All right, pillar 3. So you'll see the 6 challenges and suggestions listed here, specifically regarding students that may be falling behind, or should I say especially regarding the students. So addressing the student engagement piece, an idea was providing a wider variety of classes, content that's more engaging and interesting to students. So obviously some sort of surveys or what have you to find out what students actually would like. And that would be done by incorporating student voice into content and instruction, more so than might be the case across the board. Number 2, ensuring that students understand their options and have access to all options, meaning do not restrict participation. Some of the things, I'll give you an example, not necessarily restricting participation, but there are some challenges with students that may be taking courses at the CTA and conflicts that they might want to do other things, but because of the time and the way schedules are structured, sometimes those things are not possible. So just thinking about opportunities for students and making sure we find ways so that they all have access to everything that they might want. Improving, number 3, improving co-instruction through collaborative planning, scaffolding, and co-teaching. Number 4, improving instruction by identifying the students who need help much earlier, and then providing interventions that are student-specific and not necessarily, for lack of a better term, one size fits all. And that last piece that I stated wasn't listed. I just, like I said, for lack of a better term, one size fits all, but providing student-specific interventions. And then number 5, through additional support, the challenge of meeting students' needs would be integrating the social emotional learning strategies into the tier 1 core instruction. So finding ways so that SEL is not, and I can speak to the elementary level, not something that's done in a period all by itself, but it's woven into every content area in all facets of instruction throughout the school day. And ideally, that's what's happening. That's what our focus is as a system, to try to do that, but that's not something that we currently see across the board. So system challenges would be specifically the lack of common and shared expectations for student success, and flexibility with core and tiered instruction, and then consistently provided academic support. And I will pause for questions for Pillar 3.
I see none.
All righty, moving to Pillar 4. So you will see 6 bullets here. The ESL services in all schools is an idea that came up as opposed to our current regional structure. And then ensuring that there are effective ESL teachers, English as second language, and that core teachers are using PSYOP strategies as well. So employing proactive strategies would include strategies such as varied leadership opportunities, focus groups, listening boards, peer mentors, and application of student voice into instruction, which was stated earlier. Number 3, moving forward with project-based instruction as a means of improving instruction, student engagement, and incorporating student voice, once again. And then number 4, allowing for project-based integrated content, teaming and collaboration, and flexibility to allocate staff where needed, such as co-teaching with students, and providing targeted interventions. And then number 5, as the participants' responses lack precision on what is actually needed, meaning what to call it and what is the it that's actually needed. So providing training to teachers on differentiation, but what is the thing? Revisit and redesign the SST process for student service teams. And that process needs improvement in all areas, which is the feedback that was provided, meaning identification of members, roles of members, who should serve on the team, what does the accountability look like, how does the data get collected and reported out, and then what is the impact overall? So those were some of the things that came out of that conversation and feedback for Pillar 4. That is it for the pillar discussions. Were there any questions on Pillar 4 before I kind of summarize where we are with next steps?
I see none.
So next, what our plan is, as a steering committee, our Calvert County Steering Committee meets on January 22nd. Before that, as I stated earlier, our pillar teams will be convening between now and the 22nd to digest this information. Mr. Lane compiled an executive summary report that goes into a lot of detail about each pillar in terms of the feedback that was received. And so each pillar group will digest that information, determine how to then best respond to page 6 of our LEA comprehensive plan document, which I will reference in a few minutes. And so then our steering committee will come together on the 22nd, take what our pillar teams have discussed, formulate a plan for responding to that page 6 of questions. And then on January 30th and 31st, the plan is to have a follow-up with our administrators to share the feedback with them from their participation in November, and then get additional input for next steps. And the follow-up presentation to teachers for the Southern region will be on February 16th. The AIB has a meeting. Their next scheduled meeting is Thursday, January 18th from 1 to 5 p.m. And that is virtual. And the link is on the AIB website. All of their meeting links are available, as well as any documentation, links to the comprehensive plan and other resources. And so where we are right now is figuring out how to respond to part 1 by March 15th. That's when that is due. And then part 2, which will be pillar specific questions that we respond to, is due in July. So all of our focus right now is kind of planning for the narrative, which is the 10-page response. And let me pull that up so that you can see what that looks like. I have so many windows open. My apologies. All right, can everyone see that?
You are all good.
All right, so these bulleted questions are what we are asked to respond to initially. And we have to put it in narrative form, basically holistically speaking about how we will address these points in our response. And they've told us that we have a maximum of 10 pages to do so. So what I asked this committee, because it's the same task that our steering committee and our work groups will have, is if this group has thoughts about how we currently do business, what are some ideas from an outside perspective that might be beneficial for us to consider, then I ask you to send me that information by January 22nd so that I can share it with our steering committee. So looking at these 5 bullets, what are some things for us to consider in terms of how we approach our work over the next 9 years moving forward? Any questions on that? And this document is shared with you. It's on page 6 of that full length report. It's 37 pages. And then this is what's due in March. So these questions that I just mentioned are due in March, and then you will see questions for each pillar that are specific to certain things. So like pillar 1, high quality mixed delivery pre-K system. How do we address these things? Here is the criteria for success when we go to answer those specific questions. And it goes on through each pillar. There's a question, there's ideas to focus on, and then there's a criteria for success. So that phase of our implementation plan submission is due in July. So first the narrative in March, and then the answers to the questions in July. So we will have some time for this committee to review this document, kind of digest it, write down some think abouts, and then share your thoughts for us to then bring back to the committee with regard to the second phase of this. We'll have a little bit of time for that. So you can be thinking about both things, but by January 22nd, we just want the first part. And you can either send it directly to me or you can send it to Ms. Buckler and then have it forwarded, either way. Alrighty. I think that's it. I just have to figure out how to stop sharing the video. There it is.
Mr. Lane has joined us.
Awesome. Awesome. Right on time. Are there any questions about either of those tasks that I talked about or the document that was shared?
I see none.
So at this time, I would like to welcome Mr. Lane to our meeting. And Mr. Lane joins us. He is a resident of Maryland. Some of the strategic facilitators are in different states, but Mr. Lane is a resident of Maryland. And I will let him kind of give a brief summary of the partnership, of where he comes from. His background is in policy studies. So he's got a wealth of district experience looking at transformational change, which is spot on in terms of how we were paired with him, because he was our tops of selections in terms of when we looked at the qualifications for the strategic facilitators, because our focus was transformational change, and his background is such. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Brett, and you can introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Joe. I think my internet cut out for a second while you were introducing me, so I caught the end of it. Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet everybody. As Joe said, Brett Lane. I'm actually the strategic facilitator for 2 counties, and I'm actually in Allegheny County right now. But it's actually really interesting to actually get the expertise and experience of learning from 2 different counties, as both struggle in different ways with implementing Blueprint. And one of the things I'll just say, and I'll speak just quick words about myself, is that one thing I've been stressing, and I know Joe has stressed, is that the Blueprint is really an opportunity to leverage a number of different policies, resources. It may seem cumbersome at time, but it's really an opportunity to potentially do some pretty transformational things. And it's really been exciting to work with Joe and the whole team there to think through that. There's a lot of structures and barriers in place, but also a lot of ways to move forward. But so I'm just real briefly, I'm just outside of Baltimore. I'm in Catonsville, and I've been working on public education for about 25 years. First with 2 regional education laboratories, and then with a consulting firm that I started in early 2008, really working on how do districts scale up improvement efforts, thinking about organizational change. And in your case, it's really exciting to see so many folks with passion that talking about the principals and teachers, and also I think there's a high level of capacity of understanding of what needs to change, but then it's really also then that struggle of like, how do we actually make that happen? What mindsets need to shift, and what structures need to shift to make that change? But it's no doubt that people know what needs to happen to continue to improve the education in Calvert County. I feel like I've been preaching here, so I'm going to stop for a second. Do you guys hear me?
Yep.
Joe, I'm not sure if that's what you wanted me to talk about, because if you gave me instructions and I missed it, I apologize.
I did not. I just basically wanted you to be able to provide some background in terms of who you are, what your experience is. You talked about the partnership, and that was pretty much it, just so they can put a name to a face or a face to a name.
Yeah.
Because they'll be seeing you from time to time, I'm sure.
Yeah, so you got more than you bargained, but it's great. It's great to be here and meet you folks in person or virtually.
Now, when I mentioned you at the beginning of the meeting, I highlighted the fact that you've done a lot to aid us in our thinking of some holistic ideas and how to approach this transformational change. So some of the things that we've discussed have been very, very beneficial and moved us in a positive direction.
Yep, it's good to hear.
All right, Mr. Willis, I don't know where we are on the agenda. but that's all I have for updates.
Okay. So we moved down to new business. So you've already introduced Mr. Lane, and I do have one question for you though. Mr. Lane, you have it's unique to us, I think, maybe not to you, but you're actually doing two school systems at the same time. One, I don't know, with what I know about Blueprint, I don't know how you keep your head on straight doing this for two school systems, but I think it's a unique opportunity for you to be able to kind of juxtapose the two different systems and how we are alike and then how we are different. So has there been anything that has just been glaring to you about the differences?
Well, I think there's, some clear differences in terms of demographics, and the student population, but I think it's more about the similarities. I mean, in that in both districts, there's a recognition that instruction, while folks are working on instruction and having instruction be more engaging for students, because with the past 2 or 3 years, with COVID, with cell phones, with everything, a lot of kids are disengaged. That's not just a past emerging, but it's an urgent need to figure out how to develop the capacity of all the teachers in the community and in the school system to really provide engaging instruction, and not only engaging instruction, but what that means in terms of how leaders support teachers, how teacher leaders support teachers, and what the actual school day looks like. And so that's what I mentioned about, like, really thinking about differently about what the school day might look like. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but there's a recognition that things do need to shift. We can't just keep going, keep doing things the way we've been going, even in two different places. In Allegheny, with a tremendous amount of poverty, in Calvert, your performance is pretty high, but you probably see things coming over the horizon and you're like, we can't just keep doing things 100% the way we're doing. So,
Okay. No, I appreciate it. I probably started out in a way that I said, what are the differences? But I appreciate the approach that what are the similarities? I mean, I like that approach equally. So I appreciate it. With that said, Joe, we've got old business, and it sounds like, is there anything that we can do to make the public more aware of our campaign as we move forward? I mean, pushing information out, I know that we do that already, but if there's some way that we can help as the county government, just let me know that part.
Yeah, I don't know that there is any right now. But as I will say that it always amazes me when you have conversations about Blueprint, and I take something from Dr. Kerwin that was at one of the meetings, and he mentioned how very few people actually know about the Blueprint. And this is a massive piece of legislation that will impact students for years. And so just trying to find ways to put the information in front of people. I mean, yeah, how do we engage the community, but what are we missing? So anyone on this committee helping us determine what are we missing in terms of getting information out to people, because we send emails, we send district blasts to community, to parents, we put things on social media, we have a website where things are posted, but folks aren't going to look at that. So how do we do it? Trying to be innovative and thinking about those things is what we have to tackle.
So it's like you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly.
Okay, well, maybe we need to brainstorm that on our side as well, just see what we can come up with. The second part under old business is just update the timeline and deliverables. I think you've already done a great job of doing that. I think every time we have a session like this, it's always truly coming up to date, but then you giving us the dates and the kind of the projects as we go forward. So unless there's something else under old business on that, I think we're good, but your thoughts.
Yeah, I can't think of anything there.
Okay. And as always, I mean, if you, anything that you come up with, Ruthie sits in that chair 24 hours a day, waiting for me to give her work. So that's why we assigned her to me and you for this. So if you come up with anything, just shoot it to Ruthie and we'll get it to the group. If not, that brings us really to public comment. And I know Ruthie always provides us a really nice statement for our community, but we appreciate any comment that the public might have.
I have no public participation. I'm going to give it 1 second just to make sure. So I will spare you my reading today.
Okay. All right,
But
then.
we go to closing comment.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I'll call out your name and you can unmute and say what you would like to provide. We will start with Pamela Cousins.
Nothing to add. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Lane, and thank you, Dr. Sampson, for the update.
Thank you. Melissa Goshua.
Thank you. Yeah, my only comment is really around the fact that we're about to enter into the legislative session. And there has been a concern since the start of the blueprint about how we're actually going to fund all the things in the blueprint. You talked in the pre-K portion about maybe needing to build or retrofit things. And so I wasn't sure if there are any plans or if we've been working with legislators to put in any legislation to help fully fund the blueprint so that we can do the things that the school system needs to meet these requirements.
Well, I will tell you from my perspective, Melissa, that's certainly something that we're concerned about. We're concerned about the money for sure, but we're also concerned about how can we move this whole thing forward with, money's always limited. So we have nothing on our end. I don't know what the state may have. I know the governor says that, he needed to take a step back and look at finances across the board, but we haven't heard anything about it yet.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Donna Ostenso.
I would probably go along a comment similar to Melissa's in the sense of the financial piece. We have yet to see a career ladder presented by Calvert County Public Schools. And we are in contract negotiations. Dr. Townsell will be presenting his budget to the elected school board very soon and then to the county. And again, there are a lot of financial implications around the blueprint and what needs to be negotiated. I have a question about where we are with the 10%. Initially, at the start of the school year, the county commissioners provided a portion of the COLA to make us meet the 10%. And then we were to get the other piece of that, and it would be in our checks. Employees would see it on February 15th, which is the halfway point out of our 24 pays. So are we on schedule for that piece of the timeline to happen?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
the county commissioners have provided that and February 15th.
Yeah, I don't even, I thought it was January 15th. But maybe that, oh, well, because you're on a different timeline, because I think CASA has a different pay period structure, maybe, I don't know, but I thought it was January 15th for some, based on when or how that's done. But yes, to answer your question, that's still on track.
Okay. Thanks, Ruthie.
Thank you. Tony Navarro.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. John Norris.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. And just because they're joining us today, Linda Turner, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I just want to say I'm happy to be part of this group and it's nice to meet everyone. And I have nothing to add. Thank you.
And any closing comments from Mr. Lane?
No, thanks.
Okay. Then I will go to Mark Willis
I'm good, thank you.
and Dr. Sampson.
Yeah, just thank everyone again. And then Ms. Turner, as you venture to replace Mr. Willis in some capacity at some point as co-chair, be mindful that a second co-chair will be needed at some point as well, because I do not foresee myself living out the blueprint for the next 9 years. I don't plan to see this to its end. But
Well,
you
I
never
thought about it. I thought about it first, so you're on your own, Joe.
Well, I'm eligible for retirement before this ends, so that's why I don't know if that's going to happen.
I'm sure we can look together to find your replacement. If nobody else has anything, the last item, number 6 is, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second, Donna.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I know we have it. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week and a very happy new year. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Sampson.
everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.